Welcome to the Grid Mod Pod, brought to you by AEIC. In this podcast, you'll hear from the utility industry's top operations leaders on how their companies are working to modernize and improve our ever-evolving power grid. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, Zach. Welcome. I'm so happy you get to join us on the Grid Mod Pod today. So thanks in advance for your time. Just for our listeners, this is, a space where we come to talk to electric utility industry leaders in regards to all things grid modernization. And today I'm very excited because one, Zach, which works for Xcel, and he'll tell a little bit more about that, is also leading and shaping integrated system planning, which is one of my favorites. So, not that I have favorites, but I do. So Zach, I'm just going to give you the opportunity to introduce yourself, and then we'll jump into our conversation today.
Yeah. Good morning, Liz. Thanks for the opportunity to be on the podcast. Really excited for the conversation here. My name is Zach Pollock. I'm Director of Grid Strategy and Emerging Technologies in our Integrated System Planning Group for Xcel Energy. A little bit about Xcel. We are a multi-state utility that provides service and has the privilege to serve our customers in 8 states. We have about 3.8 million electric customers, 2.2 million gas customers. We even have some steam customers in Denver. So we really run the gamut in terms of being an integrated energy provider. And really, integrated system planning is an organization that was stood up about 2 years ago by our executive leadership to really get to the heart of the question of how do we modernize not just our electric business, but really the energy delivery business across all of the commodities that have historically operated as individual verticals and individual segments within the verticals.
So we're going to jump right in. You said the word one. When you say cross states, how many states are we in?
We're in 8 states. Most of our customers are located in Colorado and Minnesota, but we also have a big presence in Texas and New Mexico as well as parts of the upper Midwest.
Which, for our listeners, something that I think one of the objectives of the podcast is really to kind of highlight, bring to the forefront some awareness that, all electric utilities are like a fingerprint. They're unique and different, not only in regards to the design and structure, the voltage level, etc., but they're also in regards to the ownership and then the regulatory environment they sit in. It doesn't mean we can't find the solution. I think the solution truly is in empowering the people, creating the right teams, giving the guidelines, the roadmap with a strong vision. So, the fact that you're a part of an organization that is overseeing this vision, which that is what integrated system planning is, in my opinion. So I'm going to let you talk a little bit about it. So that's just really an important factor, right? So here you are, a set of leaders kind of setting up that roadmap across various entities. So what has been the approach? You said a little bit, a while back, you created this organization. What was kind of the key indicators that this needed to happen from your guys' perspective, and how's it been going?
Yeah, I think to break it down, there's probably some exogenous drivers that I think probably prompted the creation of the organization. We put together a slide kind of tracing the history of the utility industry of really the last 100 years. And I'll walk through that history because I think it tells a good story and justifies why we exist as an integrated planning organization. But if you go back to the 1930s, following the Great Depression, there's this national imperative to electrify, and that led to large parts of the country being electrified. And with that came all the health and wellness benefits of being able to access light and refrigeration, eventually air conditioning. We really haven't been in that level of infrastructure build out that we saw following the Great Depression for the last 100 years, I would argue. So, you go to the 60s and large parts of the country still weren't electrified yet. And then people started to put in air conditioning. They got their first TVs, et cetera. And then we entered that period in the 1970s and 80s with PURPA and energy efficiency, where we're really focused on building generation, but also conserving energy. That largely persisted up until, I would say, the early clean energy, which was largely focused on decarbonizing power generation sector. Xcel's done a phenomenal job, in my opinion, being a leader in decarbonizing and leading the clean energy transition in that space. And now we're at the point where both our internal goals of being a net zero energy provider by 2050 across all of our businesses, not just our electric business, as well as the policy wins that are being driven by our regulators, our stakeholders, our environmental groups in the states we operate, has shifted much more to an economy-wide decarbonization focus. And it's really solidified the need to do integrated planning, not just across generation, but really across generation, transmission, distribution, gas, steam, etc. That's underpinned, I think, the justification and the existence and development of the integrated planning organization. So the shift from decarbonizing the power generation sector to really electric utilities being the backbone of broader economy-wide decarbonization, I think that's one of the biggest justifications for the existence and development of an integrated system planning group. We can't just understand from a perspective of we plan our generation resources, our transmission system, our distribution system, et cetera, in silos. We have to understand how all those things interact with one another, as well as our gas business. So as we think about some of the requirements and our own internal goals of reducing emissions on our gas system, we need to be able to understand the impact on our electric system, on the remaining customers that may stay in our gas system. So all of those interactions, I think, underpin the shift we're seeing here from decarbonizing and reducing emissions in the power generation sector to that broader economy-wide decarbonization of end uses like heating and transportation.
So kind of summarize, like the whole, and something I say quite often here, if you're not an avid listener, but, the grounding really are fundamental thoughts when all parties are at a table and where we started and understanding the pragmatic creation of what we have, and then understanding where we are today in regards to the infrastructure of the past and where we're at present, and then where we need to be. And the where we need to be tends to be the area that becomes very gray, and there's a significant amount of agendas or technologies or feasibilities or capabilities or timelines, supply chain issues, right? Like that's where it gets, how do we, though, focus the awareness of where we are based on where we started so that we know that there's some fundamental truths to where we need to be. And so what I heard you say is you have an organization that's, driving kind of our next plan, what that plan may be, does incorporate the idea that, one, you have aged infrastructure, which I think is one thing we don't all talk about, but we did build the grid starting in the 1920s and 30s, and we still have that infrastructure to deal with. But you also have the awareness of electrification, not only our transportation, but all of this energy efficiency, heating and cooling. You also have the connectivity demand of your customers. They're asking for more as we adopt more and more technology into our homes. And then you have these main drivers around decarbonization, which is really the awareness that there is technology that can pencil out to be more affordable in this new reality. So you have all of these threats. So what you're saying is like that vision kind of came together. Now you're driving an integrated system planning organization, which I guess for our listeners is the utilities, because they have built the business based on what we were, where we are. We fundamentally have siloed organizations that have expertise in those particular assets. But now with all of this varying dynamic change, each one of those that needs to make a change in a particular asset group or fundamental knowledge needs to really incorporate all of the other groups. And that's what integrated system planning is. Not only the transmission and distribution is now being discussed, but it's really all of your expertise needs to be kind of at the forefront of your decision making. Did I summarize that right? Or am I putting words?
Yeah, exactly. A few other points I would add there. I think given the convergence of factors you enumerated there, the traditional approach to planning, whether it's siloed or not, of just kind of looking at what the system needs in 5-year periods, I think internally we've agreed that that's not an approach, given the convergence of all those variables and factors, one that's going to provide longevity to the way that we look at and invest in our system. So we're very much trying to start with a long-term vision of where do we need to be in 2050 and walk back from what does that mean today? What does that mean in the next 10 years? What is the roadmap to get to that long-term vision? Because the pace of change that we're seeing on our system is not a good fit for the typical, 5-year investment cycle that we've historically utilized to meet our system needs and our customer needs.
So thinking like pragmatically, because I think that's another thing, and one great body of work that comes from the AEIC organization when the members get together is, yes, there's the technology, there's the mission, there's the vision, but in the end, there's something called operational excellence. So, how do you gather the people, create the teams, and drive the collaboration that you talked about? So do you have examples of kind of how you guys pragmatically bring in all of these voices to really take these action plans?
Yeah, we're in the beginning stages of that, but practically it means a lot more meetings with a lot more voices in the room. But as we think about some of the drivers of our investment, right? Traditionally, we've made investments for capacity reasons. Increasingly, we're making investments for climate resilience and climate risk related to wildfire and other climate factors we have. So as our planning team, our distribution planning team starts to operationalize some of those projects, it means that we have to be hand in hand with our partners in operations on that side of the business to make sure that when we go implement projects or new investments or scopes of work, that we're doing so in a way that is efficient and it meets multiple objectives, because we can't, with the challenge and level of infrastructure investment that we have facing us over the next 30 years, particularly as the rest of the economy is decarbonizing at different rates, we can't afford to be going out there and doing something in an area 3 times over in a short span of time. So we're looking for those efficiencies, both from a planning and operational perspective, to make sure that we're doing the work efficiently, we're doing it at the lowest cost possible for our customers, and trying to realize those efficiencies.
Yeah, and just like when bringing all those voices together, like system planning, and this was kind of, where I'd come from. So I'm with you here. It was fundamentally looking at the capacity of the grid, the voltage health, what is the plan 3, 5, 10 years, and are we coordinating our projects? And something that, very quickly happens is you also have your asset management strategy fleet in regards to like the health of the assets, the response of the grid, so the reliability of it, and then really the kind of very near term issues from a maintenance perspective come to the table for that same prioritization. And then now with everything happening, you have these strategic imperatives around driving your vision towards these end goals of where we need to be. And as you guys have set those lofty goals, which, are empowering the teams. So when you're getting all these teams together, those are the voices at the table, which is where, I think a lot of the community and collaboration of not only the individual utilities, but how the partnerships across this industry could really be of a benefit to understand these fundamental drivers. So this is hence why we're here sharing. So thank you for that. So I guess the other big topic on top of like people and org structure and bringing the voices together, right, comes, and maybe you hear this word, is how are you using data analytics to drive some of these lofty goals that you have?
Yeah, it's a great question. I sort of take a step back and ask, why is data analytics so important for what we're trying to do here? And if you think through some of the drivers I talked through a few minutes ago, a lot of the variables and changes are happening at the edge of our system. That's historically not a place that we've had a lot of visibility into. If you think about the traditional utility model, developer or customer calls up, they want new service. We're generally privy to that, or we have been in the past. Now we're seeing all these changes at the edge of our system where somebody may go buy a first or second EV, they may buy a heat pump, and we don't necessarily know about that. So to plan for that long-term vision, it inherently has meant, or has translated to, utilities have to be in the business of forecasting individual customer adoption decisions at the edge of our system. So data analytics, that's a huge driver for that. We're starting to do that with some of the data that we're getting out of our advanced metering infrastructure and smart meters, being able to use interval data both to understand where customers are consuming and using energy in different ways. And then also, more critically for planning, we're starting to use that data to augment some of our traditional historical data sets like SCADA data and historical information on our system to be able to better plan at a more granular locational level. And that's been one of the marquee initiatives that our integrated system planning group across multiple teams within integrated planning has been working on this year, is really flipping the historical process of forecasting load and needs on our system from being a very top-down peanut butter spread type application to using that data at the edge of our system to understand from a bottom-up perspective, how do we think our customers are going to be using energy in new and different ways based upon various factors, where they live, what's their socioeconomic information, what have they done already, all those types of factors that can lead to us better understanding and ultimately making planning and operational decisions that better meet their needs.
Yeah, and just to like share kind of when we talk about the bottoms up planning, I mean, it's really empowering because fundamentally how the grid was built, the planners didn't really need to know what was outside the substation fence. They could, at the time when the grid was first being built, just think about devices that could monitor and meter certain flows of electrons. So we really stabilized and created a lot of our processes based on observing what's going through that primary to secondary or high to low voltage, kind of keeping it fundamental transformer. And then everything downstream we could quantify based on wire size and really like predictable load patterns. And so we talk about there's a lot on grid mod, but like an evolution that's happening and you just shared is now utilities are rapidly bringing that visibility in of their distribution grid from the edge to really be able to see and understand some of these new dynamic tasks that our customers are doing when they install said electric vehicle. And just like from a perspective, we have customers that install a pool or a hot tub or they build an addition. And so it's the same idea that if this happens multiple times in a small community, that will overload a transformer. And that visibility wasn't really needed in such a fast pace. But because you have that happening as well as all this new load, having that visibility is an advantage for the utility to be able to prioritize and really ensure the grid's being used. So like load research and analytics has always been a part of the electric utility space. But now with all the technology available, if the utility has access to that and are able to affordably roll it out and bring the data back, I mean, we're at a position where we can provide more reliability and more visibility than we never have before. So it's very exciting stuff. And it senses that you guys are doing.
Absolutely. The other point I would add there, maybe 2 points. One is that as I said before, we're now in the business of forecasting individual customer adoption decisions. And we know customers are not rational. People don't make rational economic decisions for a lot of reasons. So inevitably, that means we're going to be wrong. We could have the best data and the best modeling in the world, but we're not going to have perfect foresight into the behavior of every individual customer. So that means from a planning perspective, whereas historically, those load patterns that you talked about have been relatively predictable, they've been largely weather driven by things like air conditioning. There's a lot more uncertainty and a lot more variability that we're starting to see in customer loads. So that means we need to account for that margin in how we plan our system. We have an internal goal now of realigning all of our capacity limits relative to what the loading is of about 75% utilization. So we think having one better insight using the data to understand how customers are going to consume energy, but two, and probably more critically, recognizing some humility there and that we're likely going to be wrong in some of our forecasts. We need to have sufficient margin on our system to accommodate some of that forecast error and some of that uncertainty that comes with making those individual granular bottom-up forecast type decisions.
And just another food for thought for our listeners. And, something that's also happening as of right now, it's not even load forecast. The true load that utilities are seeing across the nation, for instance, has been growing, not based on really the electric vehicle transformation and or all of the clean, renewable, new generation sources. It's actually been, we've been running hotter, so we've been running our ACs longer for more duration, more months, as well as the evolution in highly efficient heating and cooling devices. So while we're all focused on this new transformation of technologies becoming available and is being adopted at rapid rates in pockets of our grid, we're also having our fundamental load grow based on the weather being more in both spaces. So it's very important that we have that granular data to run those analytics so that you can then make these decisions. It's like a present. It's not like
Absolutely.
a going. And I think we lose sight on that because we're
Absolutely.
all trying to figure out the future, but present day real problems for a utility, it's happening. It's here. And your groups are seeing that and working on it. So kudos to you and thank you for your services. I think you and I could talk forever on this topic, but being in your role and kind of where you've grown in your career, I think there's a platform or language or really a space where we as electric utility industry should do better at really I'm not biasing your answer right now, but really motivating, inspiring, and really creating the language to the next workforce. For those that are out there kind of seeking their next career choice or their decision coming out of high school or college, where's an area to work? And, the electric utility is the lifeline of society, and we're going through a great transformation. So we need all the bright minds. But with that being said, like, wow, in your career path and kind of looking back, what are some things that you now know that you would love to have been told yourself, or maybe some inspiration that you were giving earlier in your career that kind of gets you in the position you are today?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, what led me to go work for an electric utility, if you ask most people out of high school, like that's probably not, their top 10 list of what they want to be. It's not astronaut or firefighter, but I wanted to do work that I thought was socially impactful. And, you think about what we've already accomplished as an industry in reducing emissions. I think broadly across the US, power generation, when we had a lot of coal and gas on the system, we used to be the leader in producing emissions. And now we're, I think, probably second or third as an industry, and we continue to make great strides there. So providing real benefits to society. And now I would say that that opportunity is greatly expanded with that shift to broader economy-wide decarbonization. So really it goes back to, what's your purpose? What do you seek to get out of your vocation? For me, it's always been doing something that's socially impactful and meaningful, not just getting a paycheck. I think the advice that I would give to somebody starting out or looking at opportunities in similar areas is just stay curious. I wound up coincidentally working in this industry because I stumbled into a lecture by a Caltech professor one year who was visiting at the school I was at, talking about the future of renewable energy, and then happened to take an engineering class. I'm not an engineer. It was the worst class I ever performed in college. But it definitely stirred my curiosity, and ultimately I went on to grad school and then started working in the industry. But really just seeking to understand why. I mean, you said it before, the utility industry is the lifeline and the backbone of a lot of our economy. Our boss collectively says that, it brings health, wealth, prosperity, economic development opportunities. Everywhere that you see a light lit up in the nighttime sky, all those things are potential. So there's a tremendous opportunity to do really meaningful, impactful work here. And to me, it's just a fascinating opportunity.
I agree. I would say my college, I was electrical engineering, and it was my senior year, and it was, not to date myself, but it was after the Northeast blackout. And a professor from, the heyday was the power engineering school, which was no longer. He put a bulletin board with like push pins and this big description of like the blackout and what happened. And so that piqued my interest, which then led me to. So, my carve out is like, you never know what the words that you say in a room with an inspiring mind can do. So, having the right language and crafting the right leadership, I think is what's really needed in this, field. So I'm glad you're at the level you are and driving integrated system planning. Thanks for that. And thanks for showing up today and sharing a little perspective of the large work that's happening and that we're moving these goals forward.
Absolutely. Appreciate the opportunity, Liz, and great conversation. Look forward to further.
That's a wrap for this week's episode of the Grid Mod Pod. Thanks for tuning in. We hope today's conversation got you thinking about new and creative ways to improve our power grid. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel to be the first to hear new episodes. This podcast is brought to you by AEIC, the place where operations leaders come together to share knowledge and provide guidance to the electric utility industry. We'll be back with a new episode soon. Until then, keep powering on.